Happy New Year and welcome back to Cafe Watercolor. Before we continue with today's video, I just really want to say that I'm really heartbroken by the things that have been and continue happen in the US and to some extent the rest of the world. It's almost like no matter where I look, people are fighting, arguing, divided, while many people are in pain. They are suffering as the pandemic, politics, and other things turning their life upside down. I mentioned in my last video that I wish to help, but it's like pouring a glass of water into a giant forest fire. I am just one person and my help is very limited. However, because I have a decent sized platform here on YouTube, what I really hope that I can do is to share some peace and joy with my painting and videos. So, no matter where you come from and what you're about, if you are here, I wish you peace and happiness, and I will do my best to create content for that purpose. So let me just say it again with all my sincerity. Welcome back to Cafe Watercolor. Let's relax and enjoy watercolor together. It's not every day that I try new materials, but as this channel gets bigger, I'm starting to get many art supply sellers asking me to review their products, and while I was really flattered, I want to review the things that I actually use because it is not a product review channel. The review of the desk lamp that I did about 2 years ago, I'm still using the same light today. Anyways, sometime last year, Yonglin Lai, a wonderful watercolor artist, recommended the brand MaimeriBlu. Yonglin is a great artist and you should definitely follow him on Instagram and YouTube. I'll place the link down below. He specifically mentioned that MaimeriBlu Paint keep its wetness better than other brands while keeping their vibrancy in colors. So now that my work has more wet on wet connecting shapes, that sounded like a quality watercolor paint that I would definitely need. So I bought a few colors out of my own pocket, so this is not a paid advertisement, and I did some tests and I did a few paintings with them. The colors I bought are cerulean sky blue, cobalt blue, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and burnt umber. And if you remember this video, those colors are mostly from the limited palette that I use. I thought since those colors are what I use the most, this should give me a very good idea of how MaimeriBlu performs. And since I've been using Daniel Smith the most with a little bit of Mission Go paint, so I'm going to share with you a quick unscientific comparison between MaimeriBlu and Daniel Smith. And I'm also going to share with you the process of this painting that I use with a lot of MaimeriBlu paint that I got. Okay, let's jump into it. So this is my very unscientific comparison between the MaimeriBlu and Daniel Smith paint. I bought all this paint myself, so I'm not biased in any shape or form, just like any other review I ever did actually. So in the palette you can see that I squeeze out little pea-sized paint from both brands so that I can compare them. The top 5 colors are from MaimeriBlu and the bottom 5 colors are from Daniel Smith. So here I'm just trying to paint out some colors and testing out is wet onto wet. The left is MaimeriBlu and the right is Daniel Smith. So the blue is a mixture between cerulean blue and cobalt blue. And the warm color I'm painting in right now, these are both yellow ochre. So right off the bat you can see that the color looks quite different. The cobalt blue from MaimeriBlu has a little bit of green shade in it, so it looks warmer. And their yellow ochre is actually feels a little bit brighter, but also a little bit towards the green side as well compared to Daniel Smith. One thing I did notice is that the cerulean blue from Daniel Smith is quite dry compared to MaimeriBlu. Now, this might be because the tube itself is older. In terms of wet onto wet, both feels pretty good, but I feel MaimeriBlu feels a little bit softer, so it blends a little bit better. Both brands got good colors. The colors from MaimeriBlu feels a little bit finer though. It just got this elegant look to it. I can't quite explain it. So I'm a practical guy, so I don't want to just paint swatches all day and compare them. So I'm going to paint 2 cars side by side using different brand of colors for each one. So the 5 colors I bought are cerulean sky blue, cobalt blue, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and burnt umber, sort of like the limited palette that I use. I bought Cerulean Sky Blue from MaimeriBlu because it looks a little bit closer to the typical cerulean blue that I am used to. So 2 cards, the left one is Daniel Smith's, the right one is MaimeriBlu. So I will start with the MaimeriBlu. So a little bit of warm gray for the body of the car and something a little bit cooler for the windshield. So right off the bat, you can see that the color is a little bit warmer just because the cobalt blue that I use from MaimeriBlu, it got this warm shade to it. So it come out a little bit differently. Connect the shadow to the car. This also kind of serve as a quick tutorial for how to paint car, which is pretty fun. So I start the one with the Daniel Smith paint. So the mixture of burnt umber and cobalt blue for Daniel Smith result in a much more neutral gray. So even though I'm using the same color by name, it doesn't mean that the color looks the same. So I think each brand has their own color, even with the same name. So the cobalt blue and the burnt umber might look different for each brand. But again, both brands got very good colors. So at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to which one do you prefer. As you know, I'm never really that big with colors. So as long as the value is right and the color has good amount of warm and cool, I'm good with both. I have to say though, from what I tested, MaimeriBlu got more vibrancy in the color. Even though the color looks different, I can still tell that MaimeriBlu got a little bit more intensity in their color. And I'm using roughly the same amount of water in the mixture. So in the end, I might able to use more water to get the same amount of color intensity, so that leaves me more time to do wet on to wet works. So I'm adding some dark to the car, so the front grille and the bottom. And the car is complete. So I saw just a little bit of fun. I'm going to paint some background around the car. So here's Daniel Smith. So pretty much just some cobalt blue with some burnt sienna. So same thing here. Again, you can see the drastic difference between the cobalt blue from both brands. And you can also tell the wet on to wet blendings between both brands. So like I said, both brands offers pretty good colors. The MaimeriBlu color feels a little bit different. It's a little bit brighter, and the wet on to wet blending feels a little bit softer. Okay, so let's take a look at this painting that I did. So you might see my palette looking a little bit weird. That's because I have a smaller palette within my big John Pike palette. So I can use the MaimeriBlu colors that I get without gripping off my existing paint. So I actually did a value study for this painting, but I didn't include that in this video. I just don't want this video to run for too long. But here is it, you can see that. And now after I use a dollar pencil to just get the basic shape down, I go in with mechanical pencil and just starting to draw a little bit more detail, a little bit tighter, so that when I am painting, I can have easier time to read the shape. As you can see, I moved the boat to the left just for a little bit more balanced composition, because I don't want the boat and the house to be around the same position, because that will make the picture a little bit too heavy on the right side. So the reference image is actually not done by me. It is from a channel called Dave's Walk. So wonderful channel with a lot of England scenery. So thank you, Dave, for letting me use this beautiful scenery. I got a permission from him. So I'm using a masking fluid pen for the mast on the boat and the reflections and things like that. I rarely use masking fluid, but in this case, I really need that because I want some nice, clean, big washes. And if I need to paint around all the white mast and stuff, it's going to be a pain. So I decided to use masking fluid. Even though I can come back in later with white gouache, I think nothing really beats that nice, clean paper white. So I think masking fluid in this case will be very useful. So now I'm starting my first wash, the color of the light, and I'm pre-mixing some of the color that I need to use. So before, I will try to do what Andy Evenson do, which is wet the painting with sponge. I never really had any good luck with that for some reason, so I just decided to go back to how I originally painted. Since I paint tilted, my first wash is usually a little bit wetter, so you see that bead gather underneath, and I can continue the wash with that. And before the wash is dry, I go back in and start to fill in some colors. So in this case, those nice warm colors on the house, and the trees and stuff. For the first wash, you don't really need to think about defining any shape because it's just the light and atmosphere. So just paint in the color of the light that you see, and the goal is to have a nice clean wash. So I got a blue sky with a little hints of cloud and a lot of warm light on the trees and also the reflection of the trees. A little bit of the soft ripples, and I'm waiting for the second wash to be dry. I blow this dry a little bit because I was actually doing live stream, so I don't want to wait for it to dry. After it's completely dry, I re-wet the paper with clean water, just from top, all the way from the top to around the middle area before the roof, so that I can start to paint in some wet onto wet, get some nice soft shape for the distant trees. I really want to have that depth of the trees behind the mist, so I have to do that wet onto wet. Just make sure your mixture is a little bit dry, a little bit darker, not as watery, so that your paint will hold its shape. So as mentioned earlier in the comparison, the cobalt blue for MaimeriBlu got this nice warm green tint to it, so I'm using that to my advantage by mixing that with the burnt umber, also from MaimeriBlu. So typically when I'm using Daniel Smith's, cobalt blue and burnt umber will mix into this neutral gray, but in this case it got this nice warm greenish looking gray, which is wonderful for what this painting needs. Those trees in the backgrounds and the reflection, they need a lot of those warm brownish color that's not too overpowering. So I think MaimeriBlu color that I got fits really well in this painting. So as you can see, the second wash of the painting, I just work on the background and into the house actually. So this is one big shape that's all connected. And because the painting is still wet, I am doing a lot of wet onto wet work while I still can. I also spray some water on this, so this wash will last a little bit longer. It's not going to dry that easily because I really want a lot of wet onto wet in this painting. So I'm mixing thicker mixture and start to painting to the wet and to just get those tree shape coming out. And they are still very soft, but it's a controlled shape. So you can see the trees, but they are soft. They feel like they're behind the fog and further away, which is the depths that I really want. So it's really the matter of working with the watercolor. I can spray some water on it to make this last a little bit longer, but as it's drying, you need to adjust the thickness and the intensity of your mixture accordingly. If it's too wet, you're gonna start to see cauliflower edges. So it's a very delicate process right now. And this is arguably the hardest aspect of watercolor. But if you can get a hang of it, it can create some wonderful effect. So this is a magical stage right now. And because it is sped up, you can see the process very clearly. The paint, the shape starting to become more solid. So it's almost as I'm slowly pulling things out from the mist. And you can actually starting to see some dry brush mark, like the reddish tree around the middle and the dark tall tree in the middle above the house. You can start to see some hard edges there. And like I said, I spray some waters during the process. I sprayed it several times actually. So make sure you get a spray bottle ready and just flow some mist over it. Don't spray too close because that's going to ruin your wash. Just spray from a little bit of distance to make the wash last a little bit longer. So again, this is why I use masking fluid for all the white mast on the boat, because if I try to paint around all of that while I'm trying to do all this wet onto wet work, it's going to be a huge headache. So this allowed me to focus on making the washes and making some good wet onto wet shapes. So now I'm done with the background. I start to extend the wash down and start to paint into the middle ground and the foreground. And I really need to make sure that I have enough mixture for this because it's quite a big wash and you don't want the value to be too light. It needs to be at least somewhat in the middle value range. So to keep the wash clean, make sure you mix enough mixture for that. So now that the wash on the water surface is still wet, I am doing some wet onto wet. So the reflection of the trees and the reflection of the house, I need to get that in before it is dry because I want those to be a soft shape within the wash of the reflection. So again, very delicate step right now because if you use too much water, you might start to create cauliflower edges. But if you use too much paint, if you paint is too thick, you might end up with really dark shape. That's something that you don't want either. So at the right, you can actually start to see some dry brush marks, so you don't want to do too much now. So I'm actually painting the dark side of the house in the reflection already because I want to do it before it is dry. So right after I paint that dark side of the house, I go back in and start to paint the actual house. So now that it is reflect properly. And the house area is actually dry, so I can paint that and it's going to give me some hard shape, which is something that I want at this stage. I switched to the synthetic brush with a fine point so I can start to define things a little bit better. Some dry brushing on the rooftop for some texture, a little bit of dark side on the roof. And as soon as I start to paint the dark value on the structures, things starting to look a lot more three-dimensional. So as the water surface starting to dry, I can slowly work on the details and stuff because the big washes are pretty much done. So I'm painting the blue boat, also the reflection, and get some wet onto wet detail within that. A long time ago, I used to say one wash, one shape, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to have one single wash for the background, one single wash for the water surface, and now I'm doing smaller shape like the boat and stuff, and I'm going over them with one single wash as well. And I do some wet onto wet while I still can. And this is the time that you start to just slow down a little bit and start to add some details. And you also need to think about if you really need that detail as well, because if you add too much detail, the painting can start to look too busy. It's not going to look fresh anymore. So I usually like to keep it a little bit simple and try to use visual language to communicate with the viewer with some simple forms and simple shapes. So here I'm painting the main boat. So both the actual boat and the reflection. So when I was painting the water surface, I need to paint around the boat. So that's one of the challenging things about this painting. But after that's done, you can come back in and start to fill in some details and start to define the boat a little bit better. Use as few brushstrokes as you can manage. And I think that's the beauty of a loose painting is that you don't use excessive brushstrokes, only the ones that's needed. And that doesn't mean you start to go fast and messy. That just means that you think twice before you put down a brushstroke. So I'm blowing the painting dry because I need the painting to be absolutely dry for me to remove the masking fluid. And to be honest, this brand of masking fluid is kind of hard to remove, so it requires quite a bit of patience. And I don't want to do it too hard to damage the paper. And you really need to make sure it is completely dry. This part is still a little bit wet, so I blow them dry. I use a eraser to remove those masking fluid leftovers. But as you can see, that looks very, very clean. And I think that's going to look better than if I go back in and use whitewash. And here is the finished painting. So I use a lot of MaimeriBlu color for this painting, especially for the background and the water surface. The color looks quite beautiful. I really like it. It might not be as dark as the photo reference, but I like how clean it is, so I decided not to glaze over it again because I can pretty much ruin the wash if I try to do that. I really like the result of this painting. I hope you like it too. So I hope that was helpful. Overall, I really like MaimeriBlu's color. There's just something very elegant about the texture of their paint that I can't quite put into words. And I do feel that I got a bit more time during wet on to wet, but I don't know if it's because I use more water in my mixture or because their paint dries slower. One thing I do want to mention is that I always use watercolor tubes because even after the paint I squeeze out is dried, good quality paint can be revived very easily with just some waters. Like I mentioned in my last video of 2020, this year is all about exploring new possibilities for me in watercolor, so I am very happy that I get to try this new brand and have some success with it. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed that, and no matter where you are, who you are, I wish you a wonderful day. Stay safe and healthy. I'm Eric from Cafe Watercolor. See you next time.